Hello, everyone, and welcome to Money Matters with Doug Jones, the personal finance show focused on moving you forward financially. Well, it's that time of year when kids are going to be looking to head off to university and college. For many, it's a first, and with the pandemic of last year, even kids going into second year, it could be the first experience for them living away from home. That's going to bring with it certain stresses, such as managing their own finances. And so to help us today to discuss post-secondary education and budgets for our kids, we are joined by Rebecca Sudano. Rebecca Sudano is a senior vice president at BDO Debt Solutions, and I happen to know she's a mother of two kids who are in post-secondary education. Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Hi, Doug. Thanks for inviting me. You're absolutely right. I do have twin boys that are both attending post-secondary education, so this topic is very near and dear to my heart. I recently celebrated 25 years with BDO, and through that experience, assisting individuals with their debt, and also having the opportunity of teaching about finances, and this topic is going to be great.
Okay. So, you know, whenever there's I call them sort of seasonal events, whether it's, Christmas or back to school, whatever, there's always polls that pop up. And so there was a recent poll that I'd like to use as sort of our intro into this topic. And what jumped out at me was that 83% of the students that were surveyed said that they were experiencing some financial challenges. And then they kind of broke it down into, like, what are you feeling financially challenged about? It was general stress, how to create or work with a budget or stick to a budget, how they're going to pay for school, how they're going to pay for their living expenses. Mm-hmm. So maybe you can delve into this from your own experience and what you see in your daily job.
Yeah, the poll was actually really, really interesting. Over the years, I've had the privilege of speaking at universities and colleges in that first week, because often students are arriving at the university campus. It's the first time for some that they've been away from home. And so the struggles that they're facing it's really interesting to watch universities and colleges try to equip them to be successful in their first year, first semester. Part of the teaching opportunity has been to talk about their finances and learning how some students have come to first year and they've worked really hard. They've had part-time jobs, they've saved, they've had summer jobs, and they're there on their own dime. And there are some that are coming that have had the opportunity of being supported by family, their parents, their grandparents, their siblings. And whatever that situation is that they've come from, when they actually arrive at campus, those stresses are all the same for all of them, because it's making wise choices, and that begins with the finances. And so when I look at the amount of money that it costs for tuition, that's just the real tip of the iceberg, because there's all those hidden costs that when they arrive at campus, all of a sudden they are bombarded with, you need this list of books, and you go to the bookstore and it's huge expense. My twin boys went to university, and one of the things they were given was a card. And this was a food card, and they used that food card on campus to go to Subway, Tim Hortons, and Starbucks, but they didn't actually realize the card was going to run out. So they would go to the food hall, and then they go, I think I'm going to go get Subway, use this card that the university had given to them as part of their meal plan, but it didn't take long for that to run out. Right. And so this survey actually was interesting to see, because one of the main focuses was preparing that workable budget and preparing them to be able to understand all these unknown expenses that are going to come their way.
Exactly. And that's what I saw in the survey. The survey actually went on to sort of say, well, what is it that you're looking for help with? And what it told me is they need financial literacy help, because they were sort of saying, oh, I need help with how to set a budget, how to stick to my budget, how to manage my money, how to set up money for the future. So to me, it was all a financial literacy talk. So in your opening part, you noted that kids arrive in different formats. I think there's a survey that sort of showed most kids are attending on a combination of family assistance, whether it's parents, grandparents, whatever, and personal savings. And so when they're arriving there and they're going to start, I think we need to start the financial literacy, or I call it the money talk, at home with them to get them ready to sort of say, you know, I've got 2 kids in university, as you know, as well. And yeah, I remember my son, he got the little card and he had the meal plan. They need to start understanding about how finances work. So as a parent, before the kids get leaving home and they're going to try to experience this on their own, how are you embracing, or how are you starting that money talk?
Well, I was very fortunate to read a really good book as a parent, and it was all about boundaries. And one of the things that I found was really helpful to me was setting the expectations and setting those boundaries with the boys around money. So what was it that they were expecting from me? So was it emotional support? Was it financial support? And if it was financial support, how much were they expecting? And having them come to a conclusion as to what it was that they were expecting of themselves. And one of the items that I always wanted to talk to my boys about was the needs and the wants, and establishing for them, you know, you're going off to university, so let's talk about what's a need and what's a want. And what we established together was that me as a parent, my responsibility was to provide them with the ability to get an education. So that meant that tuition and books was something that I would help with. But the eating out, the going to the bar, the drinking, the extracurricular activities, those were things that were wants, and those were things that I felt that they needed to be able to support as they moved forward. And so I think setting those expectations and those boundaries allowed them the opportunity to look at the financial situation and know exactly what it was that they were going to be responsible to pay.
Right. So I've read some blogs and stuff like this on it about, having that sort of clear and open discussion with the kids. And so that was sort of you're setting your boundaries. Mm-hmm. Did you get into the fact that if they're going to incur some of these costs, chances are they're going to incur some debt, whether that was a student loan, a line of credit, they took on a credit card, because it's unlikely between your funding and their summer jobs, they had enough for it all. So did you get into any of those debt discussions with them?
Well, one of the things we talked about, first of all, was setting that plan. So let's deal with the things that we know, and then we're going to talk about the things we don't know. And 2020, I think, really, really helped everybody in every walk of life to realize that we really don't have a crystal ball. We can't predict everything that's going to happen. So budgeting is the plan. And I'm often quoted on, I like to call it a spending plan. You work hard for your money, so spend hard, but spend wisely. So putting the spending plan together first helps to establish where the money is going to go on a plan. So for example, we talk about budgets when we talk about, car insurance is a cost that's happening every month, but how do you plan for car repairs? And it's the same with schooling. So we know the cost of tuition, but perhaps the wants are the things that we need to have as a part of the budgeting plan. So first it's doing the plan, and then it's trying to help them to understand that student debt is an investment into their future. And with all investments, investments need to be managed wisely. The problem that I find with student loans is that we can't predict whether they're going to enjoy the course. So they're taking this course, I mean, we're expecting an 18-year-old to know they want to be a scientist or a biologist. But do we really know at 18 if that's what we want? So we can't predict that they're going to take this course and they're going to love the course. So what happens if halfway through the course they decide, I want to change paths? Well, that's okay, because the decisions they're making they're using the tools that they have today. But it helps them to understand that borrowing the money, we need to be able to look at the what ifs. And unfortunately, because of the line of work that I'm in, I'm a bit of a pessimist. And so I need to be able to help them to say, well, what if you don't like the course? How are you then going to be able to pay back this debt? And unfortunately, in student loans, there's not a lot of relief upon graduation if they're not working in the line of work that they went to school for. So student debt is a big commitment.
Right. So what we're going to do is we'll get into sort of how to manage that debt. And I just wanted to go a little bit further of, and you call it a spending plan, and I know you could do that. In your spending plan, do you show them the perils of overspending? Because as you know, there was a BDO survey a few years ago that sort of surveyed under 40-year-olds who had graduated from university, and 77% of them said they had regrets about the amount of debt they took on in university. And part of that was that they could have been a little bit more frugal in how they lived, and they may not have gone out as much as they did. So that's, to me, that's sort of the perils of going off your budget and overspending.
Yes. And peer pressure is a huge component of university that I don't think any of us expect, because people are coming from all walks of life. There are some coming and they've got a lot of money to spend. And unfortunately, if you're on a budget, you sometimes have to say, I can't participate in those activities because I will go over my budget. And it's, I think, setting those expectations and helping them to recognize that these are the things that potentially could come their way. And I think if we as a parent are able to help them to see, set your plan, but maybe have even a little bit in the plan that is available in case you go off course. And I think later we're going to talk about other types of debt that they can have. But planning out that student loan and knowing they have to pay it back and setting those expectations is absolutely paramount.
Yeah, we're in the same line of work, so I couldn't agree more, because we do see the unfortunate situations that can occur. And so I think that another part that I try to emphasize to people with their budget is it's not static. It's evolving, it's revolving. So you should be frequently following up on it, checking it, modifying it, seeing if you're staying on track. Like if you went out with your friends and spent too much one night, well, then maybe next week you're not going out so that you can rebalance that budget. But as we know, as they enter into this phase, they're probably going to be taking on some debt. So we're going to jump to the break. And when we come back from the break, I want to explore a little bit more about that debt. And then, as you noted, other forms of debt, such as credit cards, stuff like that, that they can get into when they're at university. So we'll do that after the break. Welcome back to Money Matters with Doug Jones. Today we're talking about post-secondary education, our kids heading off to colleges and university, which is about to occur, and that the fact that they're going to be living on their own, managing their own money, and that is creating some stresses for some people. And we're joined today by an expert in dealing with debt, Rebecca Sudano from BDO Debt Solutions. And so, Rebecca, we were talking about having the money talk or the financial literacy discussion with our kids beforehand. And we started delving into the fact that in order to afford this, because as you pointed out, the tuition is just one piece of it. Then there's the room and board, there's the entertainment, there's the books. When I see the prices of the books that these kids are having to pay, and then I find out that the prof wrote the book and it's only for his class, it's like it's a money-making opportunity. So, but the kids have to afford all this. So that means they're probably going to be taking on some debt. And we started delving into it. We have student loans, we have student lines of credit. And I think it's important that kids really understand that as they take this debt on, it is debt. That means it must be repaid. And Rebecca, maybe you can expand on that from what you're seeing and explain that, when does it come due, what they have to deal with when it comes due, and the fact that, as you noted earlier, it's not easy to get rid of it as soon as you graduate.
Yeah, so just to continue with the student loan part, you're absolutely right. Student loans are an investment into the future. And because of that, that's how the repayment of a student loan is set up. It's set up to be over a course of 15 years. And that's a really long time. And when you're 20, you can't imagine still paying this at 35. The difficulty is a lot of students do. And the amount of student debt is so high in some cases that it can have a trickle effect into the future. So, for example, student loans never used to report to the credit bureau. They do now. So student debt actually causes your debt to income ratio to be monitored based on that student loan. That's new. That didn't used to happen. And so because of that, holding that student loan can cause effects like trying to get a vehicle or trying to buy a house into the future. So having a plan of how much student loan you're actually going to borrow is really important. And in some conversations that I've had with students, they've actually changed where they decide to attend school because the cost of attending a further away university or college actually loses its appeal when they realize they could actually save money, maybe living closer to home or actually stay living at home. So that's the student loan component. And then, of course, there's the component of additional debt, like as you mentioned, a credit card. So we go to campus, it's first week, and there's all these banks there offering to give us credit cards. And sometimes, depending on the walk of life that individuals have come from, then it's free money. And I'm just going to get the credit card just in case something happens and I run short. And the approach is great. It gives you an opportunity, gives you a bit of a buffer, gives you some security. The difficulty is it then used for, as you said, the night out that you weren't expecting? Or, your computer broke and you ran out and grabbed another computer because you weren't really having time to think it through or save up for it. So a credit card can be a good thing, but we need to understand that it has a negative impact on your credit if you're not able to pay it back straight away. And how are you paying it back? Or if you're using student loan money to pay back the credit card, you're just shifting debt from one place to another. And credit cards come with fairly large interest rates as well, whereas student loans, potentially you have a longer period of time to pay that back. So I think credit cards could be a good thing, but in some cases could also be a dangerous thing. Interestingly enough, Doug, you can actually put a limit on the credit card.
Right.
It was a new thing that I learned, that the credit card they couldn't get could be $1,000, but they can actually call and say, could you reduce that to $300? And so I think that's important to help your child to understand that as well, that they can reduce the amount.
Yeah, so I think with the student loan part too, I think it's important to sort of note for them, they're going to get the interest deferral until they graduate. And then there are ways of deferring that further, but I'm just going to stick to the basic ones. But that credit card, if they go and incur a credit card debt now, like it's due and interest is starting to accrue, and as you noted, at a fairly significant interest rate, and if they start missing payments, that interest rate is going to go even higher on them. And so I think that's the important message here, is that as you go to school and you incur this debt, it does need to be repaid. And, the average undergrad is graduating with $28,000 in debt. And they say that if you go beyond that into graduate studies, it can be over $100,000. Well, I have a daughter in law school. She's got friends that are going to graduate with over $200,000 in debt. And as you know, that's going to report on your bureau. That's going to affect their debt to income ratio. And that will have an effect on them going forward. And so making sure that you're extremely wise with that money, to me, is critically important. It ties back to our BDO survey where 77% said, I had some regrets. I wish I had sort of curtailed it a bit. I think the other thing that we should sort of note, because when I'm dealing with people, they don't seem to realize, is a student line of credit always has a guarantor.
Yeah.
Generally a family member. And so they need to understand that what that means is the family member is liable for that debt. So if you go out and party and rack up a huge student line of credit, but you're unable to pay it, whoever co-signed it for you, generally a family member, is now going to be on the hook for it. And I think that bears, they need to think that one through.
Yeah, and I think, Doug, that comes into that family discussion about setting expectations and setting those boundaries of what it is that you are prepared to do to support your child in post-secondary, and having a two-way conversation of what that expectation is. And I often, more often than I would like to see, is I'm actually speaking with the parents because the students were not able to pay back that line of credit. And as a guarantor, it affects your credit too. And it has an impact on your ability to get debt, remortgage, and get vehicles, because that debt is attached to you. And that isn't always really clear when parents are co-signing for their student. Right. And that's very unfortunate, because that can have a real negative impact even on relationships within families. And money has become this relationship stress instead of it being an opportunity to support and encourage and move forward in their life and have the opportunities, because now debt has become a wedge between the relationship. And that's really sad to see. On the credit card and the line of credit, I think the other thing is not always reading the instructions. Again, I have boys, and no offense to you, Doug, but we don't like nails just don't seem to like to read the manuals. And I find that when, they're on their social media and they're not, or they're on a website and it says, do you agree to these terms and conditions? And they've hit accept and they haven't even read them yet. And I think potentially there's opportunity for that to happen with debt, because they don't read the credit card contract, or they don't read that if they cash advance, the interest begins immediately.
Right.
And all their understanding is, I use the credit card, I only get charged interest if I don't pay the debt back. But on a cash advance, because it was a last minute decision to go out, the cash advance is occurring interest straight away. So it's encouraging them to just read the fine print to understand the debt part before they enter into those last minute decisions. And I think that it can also stem back to the budget and the plan. And as you mentioned, being able to say, have you actually got money in the budget for those unexpected expenses? Because there's opportunity to do that within that spending plan.
So one of the things, because we've talked about credit cards a couple of times, and it's almost sounding like, because we're trustees, that, don't do them. But I think there's a benefit to a credit card, and I think we should sort of cover that it has some benefits if used properly. So maybe you could kind of go through that. Yeah,
because I think there is benefit to students obtaining debt. Sometimes if they come out of school with having incurred no debt, they have no credit record. And a credit footprint in today's society is going to be really important for them moving forward in the future. And a credit card is a really good way of being able to create that footprint. So one opportunity would be to use the credit card as a form of payment, knowing that you have the money to be able to pay that back. So one of the things it could be, you put your books on the credit card and then you take your student loan money and pay off the credit card. You've created a footprint in the credit world. So you haven't actually used the credit card to have debt. You've used the credit card to get points so that you can get air miles so you can get home, or you can use the credit card to get Walmart points so you can go buy supplies at Walmart. So there's advantages, absolutely, in having a credit card because it gives them that beginning footprint into the financial world of credit.
Right. And that's what I was trying to get at, is that if used wisely, it helps you in your future because, of course, your credit score is going to be used to advance your credit once you're out of university because you want to buy a car or whatever. And, interest rates are a reflection of debt. So if you got a good credit score, you're going to pay lower interest rates. That's the unapproved credit thing when you're applying for loans. So one of the things I thought we should quickly cover before we run out of time is that there is help on budgeting. Like I hope a lot of the universities have a lot of applications and resources for the students. We have resources at BDO for them. Maybe we should just cover those quickly so they know where to go to find these things.
Yeah, so BDO Debt Solutions website have all kinds of tools. There's budgeting workshops, there's budgeting worksheets, there's lots and lots of apps to help you with your budgeting. A lot of the banks now have spending apps attached to your bank account. As a student, one thing to check is the banking fees that you're paying at your bank. Most banks, if you're a student, don't charge you to use your debit card. And so there's lots of apps and opportunities out there, and BDO Debt Solutions website have those on there.
Awesome. So is that sort of the best way to get in touch with you if they're trying to get in touch with you, is to go to the website?
BDODebtSolutions.ca.
All right. Thanks very much for joining us today, Rebecca. Thank you, the viewers, for joining us today as well. If you have any questions or comments about today's show or suggestions for future shows, please go to the email us at the Rogers homepage by clicking on the show link. Thanks very much.